actually in Arizona today, and I'm in a business office in a little cubicle because I was having a meeting, and this is the power of telecommunications, of getting to plug in from anywhere in the world. So it's fun to be here. I can't wait.
Oh, thank you, Alex. Yeah, it really is pretty amazing, and that's one great thing about this Real Coaching Radio Network is I'm at home, and just got out of my pajamas right before the show. So.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it really is. And I just want to say it's really, it's nice to get to talk to you again. As I mentioned in introducing you, I first met you at Mark Victor Hansen's mega event back in, I believe that would be 2007, and I was very impressed by you, and you were the MC for the event, so up on stage continuously throughout the weekend. You talked a lot about what you're creating, all these businesses that you're up to, and you also just provided this amazing space for all these other powerful people to show up and talk about what they're creating as well. So it's really good to have you here and get to talk to you.
Thank you. Well, one of the things I wanted to cover today was just the concept of leading from behind as it relates to coaching, because I think a coach is just about anyone else in the world who leads someone, but leads them from behind in the sense where they're not commanding and controlling them like a CEO would many times, but they're engaging and enrolling them to do things. So a stay-at-home mom, great leader from behind. A catcher on a baseball field leads from behind. Without the catcher, the pitcher is meaningless. You can have the FedEx driver leads from behind. If they go on strike, we're in big trouble. And so there are all these people who are supportive yet indispensable and aren't always visible, but yet they are the reasons for many other people getting the glory. And so I like to take on that leadership from behind position by interviewing people just like you do, and by having more nectar extracted from the fruit of what some of these thought leaders have done. So in essence, I do what you do, only I do it with a different group of people, and typically on teleseminars rather than a radio show. So it's a very interesting concept, and I think that it should be acknowledged that those who lead and don't get credit for it, those are the true leaders, I think.
Right. I agree, and thank you for that, Alex. Yeah. And that's, you're such a well-known name, and then some people might not know who you are because of what you're talking about right now. And you've affected so many lives. And so, additionally, I want to put out there what I didn't mention in your introduction. I do want to talk about Kiva, the nonprofit that you're involved in too. So there's, quite a few topics I want to cover today. And, what I'd love to know, because I actually don't know this about you, I'd love to just know what had you get into your field. What was your inspiration? What had you kind of start where you get where you are? What was the path you took? Obviously briefly, but just to give people an idea. I like on this show the topic is what are you waiting for? So it's exploring why people wait. And there's so many people out there who have dreams and then either think, they're at point A and their dream is at point W, and they have no idea how to get from A to W. And there's obviously still more growth to go after W, but it's that what happens in between, because it's easy to look at someone like you with all of these accomplishments and all the lives you've impacted and what you're up to and think, well, impossible, I couldn't do that. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what got you started on your journey.
Well, sure. What got me started was first never confusing patience with waiting, because the two are very, very different activities and emotions. And I was dead broke on a park bench in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, California, and there was just an epic worth of activities that happened prior to that in the business I was in that was a failure because of a lack of execution intelligence on my part. I was just out of college, and I could have moved home. I could have gone to my mom's and just lived in Pasadena, but instead I wanted a park bench story. So I hung out on the park bench, and I was there for 2 weeks, and I wish I could say it was snowing and it was cold, and but I was kind of comfortable. It was a summertime, and I didn't have any money, so I just was on the park bench observing things. And one thing I observed that really changed my life, which has been a central metaphor, is the concept of patiently creating a relationship. And I was watching this woman who was feeding the pigeons there at the park, and she would go to the bird feeding. Back then you put a nickel in, you get a bunch of bird seeds, and then you would throw them at the pigeons. Well, she wanted a beak-to-hand relationship. She wanted the pigeon to come to her hand and feed from her hand. So she would walk towards the pigeons, and they would walk away. You know how they kind of walk with their head going back and forth. And then she would show them the bird seed, and they would walk towards her. And then she would walk towards them, and they'd walk away. But the distance would be collapsing. I mean, they'd get closer and closer. And they did this dance, and the dance lasted maybe 20, 30 minutes. And then finally one of the pigeons, probably a very courageous adolescent pigeon, comes up, and she's genuflecting. She's down on one knee and feeds from her hand. And then all the rest of the pigeons came, and they pretty soon landed on her, and she's like kind of the pigeon lady from that point forward. And I noticed there was a 5 or 6 year old kid who wanted to go through the same experience but didn't have the patience to go through the dance, and finally threw the birdseed at the pigeons, and they never came up to him because he wasn't willing to go through that process. Well, that taught me the concept of patience. And patience to me is much different than waiting. Patience, I think, is active. It's a proactive thing, whereas waiting is inactive, right? And patience is doing something to make things happen, although, you may not be doing much, but you're still doing it essentially proactively, whereas waiting, you're wanting things to happen to you, So success doesn't find us, we find it, as I'm sure that, it's been covered many times on this show. So I went on to patiently build my reputation in electronic marketing, because it was a lot less expensive than direct mail or space advertisement. And I went to Home Shopping Network and QVC, and I'm sure many of the listeners are very familiar with those two companies. They're both multi-billion-dollar companies. And the day that changed my life as a business person was the day when I saw that patiently, if I got feedback from the buying audience, from the people who have the wallet, then I know exactly what to say in my advertisements later on. And I had this one guest on, and he was selling something. It was a video, a comedy video. His name is Ray Stevens. He's a country singer, and most Californians where I live don't know him, but in the Bible Belt they know him very, very well. And he sold a ton of videos, and in the green room at QVC, I was watching the orders as they were coming in, and he would say certain things, and upon saying those certain things, whoom, all these orders came in. And so I took those certain things that he said. What he said is not important. The fact is he said certain things that increase the response, just like certain topics that you cover probably are more popular than others on the show. And I took that and I put that into the television ads and the space ads and everything else, because electronically I found out when people were actually ordering, and that developed this Socratic dialogue that has been the mainstay of my business, and it's allowed me to turn my annual income in 2001 into an hourly income in 2006. Not every hour, but 16 times, which is notable enough. And I teach entrepreneurs now how to turn their annual income into a monthly income by listening to the market and patiently, not waiting, but patiently responding to what they want. So those were my beginnings, and it all started through electronic marketing in the green room at QVC after the pigeons.
I love that story. That's really great. And definitely, definitely the concept of waiting as a passive, and that's how I view it too, and how I describe it in my book, Waiting for Jack. And we had I was fortunate enough to have Joan Borsenko on last week, who also made the distinction between waiting and what she talks about of discernment. And so it's similar to what you're talking about. It's just patience and discernment are actually actions. And waiting is something that when we use excuses, when we're putting our life on hold, on all of that. So that's the pigeon example is a perfect illustration of that.
Yeah, one thing also that's worth mentioning is that those who are patient trust. Those who wait don't trust. And that's a huge distinction. That's a very profound thought if you think about it. Trust is comes to those who are patient. Trust, for the people who are waiting for things to happen to them. Typically, they've lost trust, and you know what can happen when people lose trust.